Hello and welcome. Good to see everyone. Today is, I believe, Wednesday. Oh my gosh, Wednesday, December 17th. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are about to get started in a few minutes. I'm giving people a moment to trickle in to the waiting room. We've got an exciting call today. And before we get started, if you could just drop in the chat where you're dialing in from, share your name, your organization, and where you're currently located. Excellent. We are at the 12:01 mark. I am excited to get started today. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Heather Tinsley Fix, to get us started.
Hi, everyone. So glad you're all here. Welcome to the call. This is our last call for the Employer Pledge Program for this year, but it's actually also our last call as the Employer Pledge Program. And in a second, I'll talk a little bit about how the pledge is evolving. But this is a great topic today. We're talking about how AI can influence the adoption of AI across organizations. So we've got some really rich discussion coming up. I wanted to just quickly Ashley, if you could go to the next slide, talk a little bit about the evolution of the AARP Employer Pledge. Many of you may have gotten an email from me over the last 2 weeks talking about this new program that we're launching. It's really, we see it as an evolution of the Pledge program. The Pledge program has grown a lot over the last 12 years, and it's evolved to be more interactive. We've also worked to make it so more interactive. And so we want to provide new ways for us to engage with you and for you as companies to engage with each other. And so the mission, however, of the program hasn't changed. We are the new alliance, the AARP Employer Alliance, has the same aims as the pledge, which is to help organizations build age-friendly workplaces that welcome workers of all ages. Next slide, please, Ashley. So the AARP Employer Alliance is built on the notion that together we are stronger. So we invite you to join this network. It's a network of organizations that are dedicated to unleashing the power of all 5 generations in the workforce. We know that all ages bring something to their organizations, and older workers are part of that, which is, a group we talk about a lot, being AARP, but we also really are interested in how can we get people together in teams of mixed ages and unleash that synergy. We have 2 tiers of levels of involvement. The tiers are not meant to be hierarchically related to each other. In other words, one is not better than the other. It's just differences in the degree to which you want to be involved in the alliance. So tier number 1 is committing to join the conversation, right? So attending our events, getting our newsletter, learning from each other, networking across the community. Tier number 2 is, excuse me, is more of a little bit more like a pledge, which is pledging to take action. So you're committing to taking 1 action per year that you're either actively implementing or prepared to implement policies that create a multi-generational workforce where all ages thrive. And this includes a few extra benefits, which include access to workshops and coaching that help support the change in your organization. We'll continue to convene our annual in-person gathering in September. And we're also looking at ways to provide enhanced recognition from AARP in primarily our social channels, but in other platforms as well, how we can lift up the great work that you guys are doing and the change that you're making in your organizations. Next slide, Ashley. And so, yeah, this is just a little bit more about it. We'll send these slides out so you have them. But again, there's sort of the programming aspect of it, which is we'll continue to host expert speakers like Matt, who's joined us today. We'll also have cohort calls where people can share research and also best practices with each other. So there's that networking opportunity. And then we really do encourage all of you to commit to taking an action, but if you're not quite ready, tier 1 is a great way to stay involved with us, to stay connected. And we also are really committed to helping you create the change that you are committing to do. So this just gives another sort of another snapshot of our alliance. We're launching in January. So our first expert series call will be in February. And I welcome anyone's suggestions for topics that they'd like to hear about or experts they'd like to hear from. We'll have more, probably be more detailed emails coming in sort of early January, so watch out for those. Everyone who's in the pledge program now will be grandfathered into the alliance at the tier 1 level, and please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to join tier 2. We would really love that. Okay, so that's kind of, for the good of the order, announcements over. Now I'm very pleased to introduce Matt. Matt, how do you pronounce your last name? I can't believe I don't know this.
It's Pepsel.
Pepsel. Okay, Matt Pepsel. He's the vice president and godfather of talent optimization at the Predictive Index. He's also an advisor, a keynote speaker, and a professor at Boston College. Matt, welcome to our call today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation with you. So first, it'd be great if you could just give us a small context table setting on what the Predictive Index does, just so people have a sense of where you're coming from.
Yeah. So if you think about workforce analytics, when we measure behavioral profiles, we understand the right candidates for jobs, the right way to help managers to lead their people effectively and to help team dynamics. Those are some of the big areas where we put scientific data and rigor behind demystifying some of that messy people part of business.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you. And everyone, feel free to connect with Matt on LinkedIn afterwards, and learn more about the Predictive Index. So I want to dive in, Matt. We've had a couple calls prior to this one to sort of get a sense of what we might want to talk about, and we definitely we're going to get into the meat of sort of how AI can help drive. How HR can help drive AI adoption. But let's pull back a little bit before that. We're consistently living in a time of rapid change. Like we say that every time, right? And I feel like we've also been in not only rapid change from the technology front, but also a state of kind of global uncertainty. There's a lot of volatility in kind of our sort of expectations of daily life. And so how does that impact people at work to be in this sort of constant state of alertness? You have a term that I find really interesting, which is organizational entropy. So can you talk a little bit about that and how does it show up in workplaces today? And to what extent is it affected by these large tectonic forces around us that are shifting?
Yeah, Heather, it seems like years ago, the question I got most often is, when are things going to go back to normal? And I would say over the last 12 months, I don't get that question anymore because people know it's just not going to happen. There is no more normal, right? I think on this call, we've all been through many years of disruption and change, as you pointed out. And at the same time, we've seen this notion that, to me, I've been in the workforce a long time. You can tell from my gray whiskers. It feels different, doesn't it? It just feels like this. We've had changes before. I lived through a lot of technology disruption, for example, but this one just feels different. And so when I started to see that we're seeing measures move in ways that we didn't normally. So trust in leadership is way down. Manager engagement's down when usually it's a little bit more resilient than it has been. We see isolation and burnout on the rise. And the job market is sort of very perplexing right now too. Mm-hmm. So when I started looking at all these things happening and I noticed that it felt different, I started to ask the question, well, why is that? Why is that? And I found the answer in the most unusual place, which was the junk drawer in my kitchen. I mean, we've all got that junk drawer like if you need rubber bands right now, you went to your junk drawer. Everybody's got one, right?
Yep.
A couple months ago, I decided to organize my junk drawer. So I got it all laying out perfect, just great. And then over time, what happened though is, as you can expect, a month later, you couldn't tell. It was a mess again. And this is the notion of what happens with entropy, that term that you mentioned. So whenever we see these sweeping changes, it's a natural byproduct of any system, including human systems. But what's different now is that if we take a look at something like AI adoption, it's accelerating to the point where we're not able to keep the order, keep ourselves together, keep the alignment, keep the partnership, for example. And that's why it feels so different right now. And in fact, I now say that we've entered the entropy economy because its changes are happening on such a scale, as you pointed out, and so rapidly, it's outpacing the average manager, HR professional, and executive, a culture's ability to absorb all that change and keep everybody together and working in this sort of harmonious way. So I think that's the real risk and why I'm so excited to have HR professionals on the call, because I can't think of anybody in a better position to help us get the people part right at a time when we need it the most.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking about that with regard to the HR function within an organization. Organizational entropy sounds kind of woo-woo, but how do, I'll ask this question. I'm going to park this question for later, but how do you kind of speak up to management? Because I mean, like C-level folks, C-suite level folks may be like, just trying to focus on the most highly practical or the competitive side, but the people side is just as important. Anyway, we can talk about that in a minute, but, when employees get overwhelmed, and that can be at any level of the organization, sometimes managers can misinterpret that as that they're disengaged. What's really going on beneath the surface of that? Like, are people really just checking out? And we hear this a lot, also a lot in relation to younger workers, but just in general, what's going on beneath the surface?
Yeah, I had a conversation with CEO the other day and said, people just don't want to work anymore. And I thought, you're talking about people that, do work, by the way. You may not see it the same way, but they also run a side hustle or two. They volunteer on the weekends. They want to work. They just don't want to work for you, or not like this.
Right.
And I think it's not a question of work ethic. And I like to say that it's a misattribution. So when we start to see the nature of what people are feeling, they're feeling disconnected. They're feeling separated. They're feeling afraid. They feel anxious. And so it's not surprising that they're looking for some sort of relief from all that feeling. But at the same time, it does go both ways too, because when I talk to employees, they say, oh, they're just trying to use AI to automate me out of a job, or they're just greedy. They just want to build this big company full of robots, or you hear all kinds of things. And in reality, if we extend our empathy to executives as well, they're afraid too. They're afraid of falling behind. They're afraid of not being competitive. So they're feeling this tremendous pressure, whether it's from their boards or from the marketplace, to rush and try to keep up. Transformation is taking away companies overnight, that we thought were stalwarts. So I think if we take a step back and we realize that we're personalizing the challenges, we're blaming one another in some cases, or we're skeptical of each other. If I let you work from home, you're probably doing your laundry, these kinds of things you hear about. Instead of recognizing entropy as, like you said, it's not woo-woo at all. It's a very much a real physical and a human systems phenomena. And we have to realize that this is inevitable. Like, the level of complexity, the level of change absorption means this is exactly what was going to happen. Now we can take action to really stay aligned and bring ourselves back together.
Right. Okay. So on that note, sort of shifting to that, how do we stay aligned? So we've got a lot of promise with AI. There's fields in which AI outperforms humans. Like, I'm thinking particularly of radiology, which is fascinating to me, right? Interesting. And then there's also perils where, AI spits out the wrong answer or hallucinates or whatever. So how do those two sort of twin poles of AI replacing humans on certain job tasks contribute to that, like, permanent entropy? Like, you put it in order and it's already all out of order again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think not all jobs are affected the same. And I think, like, if you think about manufacturing, if you think about some of these different heavy industry, they may have had advances in robotics. There's always been sort of technology upgrades that kind of change jobs, if not threaten them. Now we're starting to see it across. I don't know of any job that's not affected by AI. Again, it's very different. It's very widespread. And I'm sure everybody on the call is at varying stages of their AI journey. And I think we actually have a poll maybe to help us understand the audience a little bit about where we are when it comes to AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Ashley, that'd be great, actually, if we could put the poll up. So how often are you currently using AI in workforce management practices? We'll let you guys get to grips with that.
This is my favorite part, Heather. I love data.
Yeah.
Roll around in it.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. It's always good to get a pulse check on how much people are using AI. I mean, I use it in my work, but I try really hard not to use it for writing. Because I feel like that's a slippery slope, and then I'll just, use it exclusively for writing, and I'll stop being good at writing, which, is a skill I value. But I do use it, though. I do. I use AI mostly as like a thesaurus and as a search, help with search.
Yeah, I think we're all on our own personal journey as to how we use it. And I think none of us are done. It will continue to evolve, and so will we, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So let's see if we can pull up the results, Ashley.
We can. So we have about 22 people have responded. 27% answer that they are an early AI adopter. 9% say we actively use AI. 41% we're just getting started. And 23% we do not use AI yet.
There you go. Wow. So almost 2/3 that are so either just getting started or maybe haven't quite started yet. But it's nice to see certainly almost I guess a quarter as early adopters too.
Yeah, that surprised me. I
Yeah.
was surprised that the early adopters were at almost a quarter. Yeah.
Statistics nerds like me, we call that bimodal distribution, right? It's got those two. It's
Oh,
two.
is it like a camel's hump?
It is two camel humps.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not surprising because it's almost this thing of for organizations and for people that are comfortable with technology, sometimes they rush out and like, yeah, let's try, let's experiment. We've got a culture of safety. We really want to go fast. We're in a progressive industry. Sure. And then others on the call might be like, yeah, that doesn't sound like us. We're a little more careful. Maybe we're in a highly regulated environment. Maybe there's, some reasons to be cautious or, lots of different reasons. But it's that's very helpful from the audience to understand sort of where we are on this journey.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. So, okay, can you talk to the ways that you you alluded to this, leaders may have different goals or different pressures than their employees. And how can HR help bridge that gap between, because, I mean, you read, okay, so I just like quickly before the call looked up like predictions of job loss to AI by 2030. And they range from like 92 million to 400 million jobs. Like it's a huge range and we don't really know. So how do you help, how do you help connect as HR folks? Like you work for the company, right? You've got to maintain those goals. How do
Mhm.
you bridge the gap between sort of differing pressures between leaders and their team?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that, certainly by 2030, almost every job will be touched to some extent by AI. Will some be eliminated? Yeah, actually. Will some be created that don't exist today? Yeah, that's also true. And many will be sort of refactored in some way or deconstructed and reconstructed, whatever you might want to consider that. So I think it's safe to say that, just as you pointed out too, Heather, as stewards of the company, whether you're on the employee side, the executive side, the HR side, we should all be stewards of our companies. And that means that we have to take advantage of things that make us more productive, more competitive, most importantly, to create value for all of our stakeholders, whether that's customers, employees, our families, communities, society, whatever it might be. So as you look at that, though, the difference becomes from executives tend to be more sort of progressive, dynamic, risk comfortable type of people. And they might walk up to an employee and say, good news, we can eliminate 50% of your mundane administrative tasks with AI. Isn't that great? And people are like, no, that's not great at all. Like, I actually enjoy those things, or I went to school for those things, or you haven't told me what else you're going to do with me or with my time. So this is an example where executives are like, what are you talking about? This is going to make us so much more productive and efficient. Isn't that just the best thing ever? And the answer is, well, it's not that simple, right? And so I feel like what really happens here is that employees want security. They want to know they have a job, especially when you read the headlines today. And just as you said, we're going to lose 400 million jobs by 2030, or company X has laid off 1,000 people with an email, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be out there, and so you're afraid. So what happens sometimes we see that employees will either hoard knowledge, or they'll drag their feet, or they'll resist as best they can, or they'll say they go along with it, but in reality say, I tried it, it didn't work. There's any number of things that come from not a great place, and then executives get frustrated, and then all of a sudden now we're not in partnership anymore. We're having a power struggle. You're going to have to come back to the office. You're going to get fired if you don't teach our agents how to do stuff. Like it can range in severity, right?
Right.
And I think that when we come back to this and we say, okay, if these natural forces of change and of entropy are going to pull us apart if we allow them to, how do we make sure that we stick together? It's just like if we were on a camping trip in the woods, we stick together. It's dangerous out there.
Yeah.
Then we have to find those ways of being transparent with one another and saying to the executives, for example, if they say, "Look, here's the situation. Let's pretend you run a software development shop, and you're like, all of our competitors and we too are looking to get more productivity by using AI in the way that we build software. Great. So how can we do that?" As in partnership, how do we give you access to tool or whatever it might be? And I think having dialogue from employees and employers together is going to be a way to bridge that gap. This is where HR comes in because HR is in this amazing position. And I say amazing in that it's amazing. And it's also amazingly difficult in that you're trying to kind of thread a needle, if you will, between the executive appetite for change, the employee's natural resistance to that change, but also having your business hat on and saying, how can I be a good steward of the business and help all of these people with their exciting personalities really come together and move forward together? And that's going to take something different than it used to. And that's why I feel like this equal balance between having strong business acumen, increasingly technical acumen, but also, the people side that we all trained for and love probably the most.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like this. I think the notion of bringing employees into the dialogue is like into the solutioning is probably really powerful. I mean, I know it's maybe not, it's hard to imagine how that happens at scale for like really big companies, but nevertheless, I think at least including them in the conversation helps them feel less sort of shut out or in a black box and not knowing what's going to happen. Because if you don't know what's going to happen, then like you were saying, there's this like disengagement and this, perceived lack of commitment or even actual lack of commitment because they're like, hey, if you're not going to take care of me, then, I've got to look elsewhere. So,
well, and I think some of it too is raising our awareness, and if we use a soft term like empathy, that's not always going to win us over with the business. But if we say, let's use common sense, in reality, we end up hiring a lot of people to do high precision, high quality, low defect work. Okay, let's just say that they produce widgets, and we need that to be done at scale. And then all of a sudden, here comes this unproven. We're all excited about it, but the hype machine is fully going when it comes to AI. And we say to these people who we hired to do a certain type of job, yeah, forget all that. Actually, just take this unproven thing and run with it. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's not who I am. That's not what I value. That's not why you brought me here. I have a million questions you haven't even slowed down to take the time to answer, like in the real world. And all of a sudden, we wonder why we're at odds with one another. Yeah. So instead, I think appreciating people's personality drivers and differences, understanding their appetite for risk. I'm not saying that we're not going to move forward. We have to move forward, but we have to do it together. We don't gain anything. And in fact, there's been a lot of this boomerang hiring taking place where companies might have been so quick to say, we're going to eliminate all these people in favor of AI. And then they're like, well, actually, we're going to hire you back because, that's because if we go too quickly and we don't take our people with us, then that's the inevitable consequence one way or the other is that, we don't go on that journey together. And what happens is, there's going to be a lot of revenge quitting that happens in 2026. I predict that as the markets begin to open up, people can move around in the job market a little bit, things begin to stabilize somewhat. A lot of people are unhappy right now, but realizing that this is not the time to be in the job market. So instead, as soon as they see daylight, they're going to run. And now all of a sudden, when you think about an employer who has not necessarily kept payroll up to market and then has this exodus of any size. And now you got to hire people back at a more expensive rate. What's going to happen to all that productivity gain you wanted to get from AI in the first place? It's, your proposed savings are going to be lost to real losses, right? When it comes to, you got to put, people onto the payroll at a much higher price than it would have cost you otherwise. So this is why I think it's really important for HR in particular to help us call time out. What are we trying to accomplish? What's the most orderly way to get there in a way that satisfies the executive appetite for change, but balances it with employee interests and also holds everyone accountable? I expect my executives to be accountable for the people dynamics in their company. And I expect employees to be accountable to say, look, if AI can do some part of your job better, it's going to. It has to, right? For us to remain competitive and to be a profitable, ongoing concern, that has to happen. But how can we make that happen? How can we find something else that's more value add for you to do? How can we help you with that natural behavioral change to get there? That's partnership, right?
Yeah, and it really strikes me when we're talking that these are the metrics that HR can say, use to executive. It's like turnover cost, or if you hire them back, they're going to be more expensive, or, lower engagement leads to productivity losses. And so you may have a bump from AI, but you may have a loss in engagement. I think those are all kind of strikes. And please, folks, feel free to say in the chat, like how you would, message up, like how you would, lead from behind and have your leaders come into this notion that we have to do this together. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that in this job market too, Heather, when you think about turnover as something we keep an eye on, it may show up differently today as you mentioned, engagement, scores being a little bit lower, sure, but also absenteeism. We have a lot of
Yeah.
people calling out these days. They're not quitting because they're not necessarily wanting to be out there, but they're hanging in. But then they're like, when you start seeing that Slack and Microsoft Teams get super quiet at 5:01 p.m., you're like, oh, that didn't used
Mhm.
to happen. Or people are calling out sick, and you're like, oh, that's kind of going up. Those are all just subtle signs that people are like, yeah, I'm not feeling this. I'm not with you, right? And every time somebody's not with you, you need to turn around and say, do I need to slow down? Do I need to communicate differently? How do I act like a magnet and draw them back in? And that's where, I think a lot of the research around what counteracts entropy is really, really important right now.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. Speaking of energy, um, so your thesis is that commitment is a form of human energy that counteracts entropy. You were just saying this is the research around counteracting entropy. So how can companies, and especially HR, create the conditions for commitment in an environment that's, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex,
Mhm.
ambiguous?
And will continue to be, right? So it's definitely, just as I mentioned with my silly junk drawer example, it took a little bit of energy for me to restore order, even though it was just going to be pulled apart again. And that's what we find. Entropy cannot be stopped, but energy can help us to restore order, if you will. So what is it that can kind of provide that energy? That was what I went trying to search and find. And commitment emerged as something that it absolutely does that. It helps us almost again like that magnetism. It's that magnetic force that holds us close together and holds us in partnership and cohesion, if you will. And so when you think about what goes into it, one that I found is hope. And so how many times are we painting a positive future that people look at and they're like, that's inspiring to me. That's motivating to me. That's something I want as well. And I can see my role in it. So immediately as an HR professional, I'm thinking, are my managers really good at espousing hope, making
Mhm.
people feel hopeful? Are they painting a clear picture of why we're doing these things, how we're going to, serve our customers better as a result of some of these new AI capabilities? And most importantly, they can see their role in it. So like with
Mhm.
bank tellers or whatever industry we're in, I saw Land O'Lakes on the call. I saw, some of the different examples of companies on the call. Think about your average managers. How well are they focused on creating that positive view of the future and making sure people see their role in it? But the second one is mutuality. Do we all participate equally in the benefit that we're working so hard for? If we feel like, well, I see what's good for the company and I see what's good for, maybe our shareholders, but I'm not going to do so well as a result of this, that's not mutuality. Now, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, instead of being tightly held together, that's where people start to spread out. They start pursuing their own self-interest, right? Because they don't feel like, hey, I could just be working a lot and I'm going to disappear. And the last one that I'll share is something I call synchrony. So when you think about like in crew and those rowboats where everybody
Mhm.
rows at the same time, the coxswain is there, making sure everybody stays on the beat. That's what happens when you expend energy together in a synchronized way. That doesn't happen all the time when all of a sudden we're miscommunicating. We don't provide right access to the tools. We have questions that go unanswered. All of our energy in those cases gets frittered away by things that don't actually produce value. So when we increase commitment, for example, then all of a sudden everything flows a lot more smoothly and efficiently. But if we have managers out there who are not espousing hope and generating hope with their people, if they're not helping others understand sort of the mutual benefits in both directions, or if they're coordination issues because they just haven't given them the answers, the tools, the training, whatever, all of a sudden, a lot more energy goes into conflict, confusion, complexity, competing goals, competing styles, all these things. That's not value add activity. So pretty soon, a good chunk of your payroll is now going to mismanagement, if you will. So again, HR calls timeout and says, hold on, things
Mhm.
are different. We're going through a change. We need to make sure managers are equipped to do these things. And certainly that executives value these things and endorse us training and helping on these things. That's the only time that you're going to see that these natural forces don't just rip our organizations apart, which is exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, and it also, it's easy to pick on big tech companies because they're always in the news, but I'm curious if you have seen when you've talked to companies and worked with companies that this type of orientation towards sort of away from the collective, away from concepts like hope and mutuality, do they tend to adhere to certain, like functions within an organization more than others, or is everybody just affected?
Well, typically what you find is that the more people-centric functions tend to sort of get with the program a little faster.
Right.
So we find, for example, like in education, some parts of healthcare, for example, where humans are seen as indispensable, then we tend to listen more. What you also find is that the better performing companies, surprisingly, are kind of the best places to work kind of companies. I think those
Mhm.
things go hand in hand. A lot of times we feel like if we do the people thing, then we're not being productive business people. When increasingly, those are just two sides of the same coin. So
Right.
there's a tremendous amount of correlation between best places to work and high performing companies. And you're like, well, which came first, right? Chicken and the egg. And you're like, well, they kind of go hand in hand. So I'd say that the more progressive companies, the more people-centric, people-forward companies will actually do better in this technology adoption than those tech-first companies will, which
Mhm.
is kind of paradoxical in a
Yeah,
way,
it
but
is
it's
paradoxical.
yeah, but it's entirely true. So I think that some companies that have nothing to do with tech are using tech in a way, but they're taking their people with them as they do it, and they're actually distancing themselves from the competition. You want to get the CEO and the CFO's attention, tell them how you're going to distance yourself from the competition, right? That they're going to be
Right.
all ears for that, and
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
how it works. So I feel like I think that there's going to be a real shift in HR in the sense that I'll just use a round number and say half of the field will continue to cling to the past in a way and focus on more of the transactional, tactical elements that are increasingly going to algorithms. And it's not a judgment, it's just what's happening. But the better part, the exciting part of HR will always remain, which is the coaching role, the strategic, the consulting role, the human role, the how do we get the best out of our people role. And I think that's going to be really exciting because now the technology tools can actually become an ambassador for HR. We can actually infuse ourselves into those tools to help guide the organization to get better at the people part, even at a time of rising technology. But that's a pretty enlightened view compared to,
Yeah.
what we're doing in 2025, at least in my experience.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the reason that we are farther from that enlightenment view than we might want to be is this fear of missing out, this fear of like, we have to do something now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And fear is a cycle, right? So if I'm an executive and I'm afraid because I read Harvard Business Review and it says I'm behind, now all of a sudden I'm acting out of fear. Well, we
Right.
remember that fear is a destructive force. It's not a creative force. And so all it's going to do is destroy value because what happens is then as soon as I make my employees fearful, because now I'm moving too fast, I'm not giving them the tools and the answers, they're going to experience that anxiety and that fear. And what's happening on both sides, Heather, is we're each retreating into our own self-interest as opposed to
Right.
the collective interest. So that's what ego and fear does. It makes us afraid for ourselves. So now all of a sudden I'm hoarding knowledge. As an executive, I'll just push harder. It all comes from a singular place at exactly the time when we need to be working together, when we need to find that collective beat that really is that mutuality I talked about earlier. So fear is something that we can feel fear. That's fine. But do we act on it? That's not fine. That's not what leaders do, right? From all the training we're supposed to get when it comes to emotional intelligence and self-regulation and emotional agility and all these things, it's like, yeah, feel the fear. That's natural. But if you act on it, that's not leadership. That's something else.
Got it. Yeah. That's fascinating. I want to just pause here real quick because we've had some interesting comments in the chat. Philomena mentioned a couple of things that you've done at Land O'Lakes. Um, Philomena, you said we have a lot of training on AI for our HR community as well as more broadly. Would you mind coming off mute just so quickly to tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you, Dr. Matt,
Thank you, Philomena.
for all the info. But I think to your point, there was a lot of worry and skepticism about AI, as we began the year last year. And so just trying to be proactive. So our HR community, we have a designated leader who's kind of like our AI champion, connecting in with external resources to bring information to us. And then different workshops for our HR community just to learn more about it. And then more broadly in the organization, we've had that where employees can sign up more to learn. Our employee resource groups, I do employee engagement work, have also been talking about AI. So it's like multiple channels. And I think a big piece is to educate inform and reduce the fear that
Nice.
employees may be feeling and build confidence on how I might use the tool.
Well done. Yes, I love that. And so all of a sudden, when you're like, okay, it's still a little scary because I don't know how I'm going to use it. How much better does it feel when you have coworkers who are going through it? You're sharing notes. You create a culture not just of safety, but also of mutual support. We're giving you training. We're making it optional at first. Now, someday it may not be optional, but it is at first, right? And these types of things are ways to help people take their time. And some people are probably running really fast with it, and they're early adopters inside your company, and they're trying new things, and they're really vocal because they're passionate about it. And that's great, but not everybody's going to be. And that's okay too, so long as we're constantly moving forward and so long as we're sticking together.
Yeah.
Really nice.
So Matt, it's just coming back to that. That sounds like a workplace of high commitment. So you've kind of just described what a high commitment workplace looks and feels like.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like what happens if you were to take the transcripts, for example, out of a Zoom call of one of the random manager calls, you can look at a couple things. You can see the nature of the language. If you see a lot of I, right, or a lot of you, that's not so great. When you see a lot of we and us, all of a sudden that's a reference to collectivism. So are our managers finding those we terms, right? Or are they painting a picture of, well, you need to do this, or, well, here's what I want to see, right? Those are polarizing terms. They kind of stoke that fear, so to speak. But the same is true of body language. You know, when you start to see people just inherently will carry their emotions. Are we training our managers well enough to look for those signs of withdrawal or, you know, those sorts of fear? But what happens is inside of a high commitment organization, everything is easier, faster, a little more effortless, tighter. And you can imagine if we had to pass a bean bag and we were 1 foot away, it'd be super easy. And if we were 10 feet away, well, we're probably going to drop a few as we're passing them. That's what happens is we spread out because of our self-interest. But in high commitment organizations, when everybody's tighter, now all of a sudden, you know, it's not to say we're never going to drop a beanbag, but it does mean that it's a lot easier to pass things around, information share. Think of what we just learned from Land O'Lakes. Now all of a sudden, we're finding multiple layers in which to make people gain some exposure around AI. That's what high commitment does. And so if you think, you know, Philomena, for example, if you think about the level of hopefulness that people have, it's probably a lot higher now at the end of 2025 than it was in the beginning. That's what I heard in your comments. And what about the level of mutuality? Well, you know, we had somebody who was in charge. They kind of ran out in front, but at the same time, everybody got to participate. Everybody had options to join if their schedules and their interests permitted. That's a lot of mutuality coming through. And when it comes to the synchrony, now all of a sudden, you know, again, in Philomena's example, you're hearing about people who are trying things, doing this, doing that. They're kind of coordinating that. It's almost like you can hear a beat, like a real coordinated beat. That's high commitment. So I don't know Philomena, I don't know Land of Lakes, but I'm thinking this what I'm hearing a lot sounds a lot more like toward high commitment. And it's what we certainly want to hear a lot more of versus the calls I get today, which are quite different.
So that was going to be my next question. What happens if a company has, you know, been acting out of fear, been adopting and investing kind of like, you know, crazy and sort of haphazardly and not kind of bringing people along with them? How can leaders help heal that type of separation? How can they, as they see people sort of disconnect and drift away, how can they bring them back? What are, like, let's say they've gotten into a bit of a bind with this and they want to heal that. How do they go about it?
It's such a great term, you know, because it's exactly what has to happen. When you think about healing it, it sounds like there's a wound, like something we hurt. And I think when I look at the stats, and I certainly talk to people every day, I hear a workforce that's in pain. And there's a lot of psychological frustration and stress and fear. They're hurting. And I think that a lot of them feel isolated and separated. If you work in a remote or a hybrid environment, it's probably even more so than we had anticipated, for example. So that separation really, it does damage to us. It really does. So when we want to heal that separation, and if we find ourselves in a place like, hey, we're not all aligned right now. We're kind of, I see us devolving a little bit. Entropy's winning a little bit. It's getting into our self-interest. The first thing I like to do is call timeout and name it. Like, what are the things that are causing us to separate? Is it, for example, AI and people are afraid about job security? Maybe, but maybe it's also about some generational tension, right? Something this group knows a lot about, right? You mentioned 5 generations of workforce. Pretty soon it's going to be 6. Because I don't know a lot of boomers who are like, I'm just so anxious to retire. I know quite a few boomers who are like, why? I feel great. Plus, I'm
Yeah.
going to live indefinitely. I'm staying in the workforce. Thank you very much. So we're going to end up with 6 generations before long. And so those generational tensions and differences can be a form of entropy as well. If so, let's name it. And I saw the example again that came in the chat around reverse mentoring. So that's a great way to reverse some of that trend. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting exposure in reverse mentoring. I've learned so much from Gen Z. I continue to every day. 6, 7. Like it's new for me, right? It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but on seriously, it's like that. Those are some examples about how we draw each other closer together, as opposed to allow ourselves to be pushed apart, right?
Mhm.
So I think naming it is good. And then once we get to the point where we've got everything on the table, we've demonstrated a level of empathy, we've understood what's kind of driving us apart a little bit, let's name those things that bring us back together, right? Let's talk about psychological safety, trust, transparency. Where do we have role clarity? Sometimes the clarity is lacking. Where are we finding competing goals? Because maybe some of our incentive systems haven't kept date with some of the changes we're trying to, where are we not modeling leadership behaviors? So just like we name the things that are pulling us apart, let's name the ones that pull us back together and ask our employees, which of these are most important to you first? And they might say, clarity. You just haven't
Yeah.
told us the thing. Great. Let's give the people what they want. P.T. Barnum was right. And
Mhm.
let's really focus on that. I feel like that's a great place to start.
Yeah. And I think role clarity is probably got to be revisited more frequently than it used to be, because it seems to me that like jobs are changing more quickly than they used to change. So that clarity is, I think that's got to be super key. I also think that it's easy-ish to do things like make sure there's training and make sure there's access to training. It's much, I feel like it's much harder to create that safety, but even going back to the training for a second, create the space within a job to take the training. I find the idea of taking training exhausting because I have so much on my plate. So can you talk a little bit about some of the human-centric management practices that can help in getting folks to, yes, one, kind of like get over those, like, create psychological safety, get over the fear, but two, just kind of have the bandwidth to adopt AI and like really get to grips with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example where we really need our HR leaders on the call to help us to understand some things like we need to slow down to go fast. Again, when it comes to people, it's super counterintuitive, but when it comes to people, fast is slow and slow is fast. If we try to rush the change and we don't equip our managers and the people who are affected, a 6-month change program is going to take 18 months, best case, right? It's just we elongate everything, and we're well intentioned, but our execution is poor from the lens of human systems. And I would say to executives, you don't get to decide whether you want to get good at the people part or not. You must be. You just have to be. What the heck else are you doing all day, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're not, if you're running an accounting firm, you're not doing the accounting anymore. That ended a long time ago. You better get good at the people part, which means you better be a good partner to me as your HR professional. So I think that's one thing is being able to say, if we want to get the gains that AI promises, and we all believe it's true, we've got to create a little bit of space for training and tooling and some experimentation time and create some of that safety. Otherwise, we're not going to get it and everybody's going to be frustrated. And in fact, now at the end of 2025, you look back, most AI adoption programs are underproducing what we thought they
Yes.
would. Why? Because nobody did the people stuff right. I'm not saying nobody, but
Yeah.
the reality is that if we overlook it, then it's going to be 2027 before you even see some of these gains, because you're going to have to go backward. Now everything takes longer because you destroyed value in the form of burning trust, not creating clarity, all the things. So, and I don't think executives want that. They don't. But remember,
Yeah.
they didn't go to school for this stuff. They weren't drawn to the vocation the way the HR professionals were. So every chance I get when I talk to executives, I say you have to elevate your HR professionals, because the only competitive differentiator left in business is the human part. Because if AI can do it, it's commoditized, period. That means your competition can do it too. Whoever can recruit and develop and retain the talent is going to be the most competitive. That's why we need HR now more than ever, in my book. So I feel like slowing down, listening, leading by example. Follow Land O'Lakes' great example about providing access to training, make it optional at first, ease people in. Like, these are great ways to really make sure that we stick together and take our people with us.
Great. Okay, so we're right at 12:45 and I want to open it up to Q&A. And while folks feel free to come off mute or to put things into the chat or to the chat function. I'm just going to check chat to see what we have. Um, so yeah, but while people are thinking of other questions to ask, I'm curious about um, the I just lost my train of thought, but there was a question I had kind of around the the boosting AI adoption, but also oh yeah, it's about you mentioned people. There's like a trend for rehiring people back, right?
Oh,
So
yes, the
you know
boomerang hires.
you feel like okay, I'm going to outsource all these functions to AI, and then the AI because it is not we believe the marketers and they say it's all this hype, but then it doesn't actually do what we wanted it to, or it messes up in ways we don't know, and we have to bring back these experts. And I feel like there is a generational twist to that. To me, I feel like I've been curious to know if a lot of companies are going to be wanting their experienced workers to come back because they do have the pre-AI knowledge to try and like tinker with where the AI went wrong. And I'm curious if you are seeing that or if it's something you counsel employers to do.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit all over the place in the sense that different jobs are affected differently. The nature of what we need in organizations varies from company to company. But I'll tell you, in the program that I run over at Boston College, I teach classes, and we have a program where some of the more experienced people might decide to become a fellow and come back and do some different types of coursework. And I remember many of them are saying that they're interested in returning to organizations as a way to provide mentorship specifically. So I think it's some of it might be experience, meaning I did the job for 30 years, but some of it might just be like I'm a thoughtful, well-intentioned person. I'm good at the social glue inside of companies.
Right. Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think companies realize that as we continue to mechanize and digitize and all those things, then we're losing some of that human layer. So I think there's real value to be had by having somebody on the payroll, especially in larger organizations, whose job is really to conduct that type of mentoring and facilitate some reverse mentoring as well. There's real value there because people
Yeah.
need to feel connected to the culture, to one another. I love the example of ERGs, et cetera. And yeah, so I think that there's going to vary, but I think that there's a lot of boomerang hires. In some cases, it's a straight one for one. Thought we didn't need you. Turns out we did. Others, it's kind of a job sort of redesign where it's like, well, we need something a little different than what you did, but we'd love to have you back to do this other thing. And it's a lot faster for you to do it than somebody else. That's going to happen. And other times it might just be like, we've lost something in this and we'd like you to come back and be some social glue. So I think it's going to vary.
Yeah. Kind of moving to the predictive index a little bit, which, I find I find the whole process of recruiting fascinating because it seems like there's a science and an art to it. How do you, how do you hire for these types of skills that are so difficult to prove?
Yeah. Well,
I could put it on my LinkedIn profile, but like, can I do that?
And sometimes we're looking for skills that have not existed in the workforce before at all. Like right now, one of the big things for marketers is AI engine optimization. So AI is recommending, and like it's a little bit different than traditional like writing for Google, like keywords and stuff. So it's like, who's going to show up and say, I've got 3 years of AI engine optimization experience? No, you don't. Nobody does. So you're
Right.
like, okay, great. So I think that from a PI's perspective, when you think about hiring for behavioral fit, right? Because I can't really change my personality. I can learn all kinds of skills, but I am who I am. Like I'm a talkative, passionate, energetic kind of person. You put me in a cubicle and just answering help desk, like terrible fit for both of us. That's going to not turn out so well. So I think hiring for behavioral fit's important. Understanding that in some cases, if you hire for somebody who doesn't have the skills, that's okay if you've got the training programs for them. You can skill them up relatively quickly if the want to is there. But a lot of times, I think that's an important part. And then also, what we immediately see is that the most interesting and dangerous form of work is team-based work. When I hire somebody to work on a team and I don't prepare that team for how the personalities are similar or different, or how I'm asking them to do this very specific role that's different than how all of you are wired. You all are wired to take chances. I need somebody to actually keep us from driving into the ditch. Like that's a whole different team dynamic now. So this is where demystifying the human process with data is a HR person's best friend to be able to say, now we have real science to go with that art, to your point, Heather, about how we can actually get the people part right, both for selection, for onboarding into a team and team dynamics, the manager one-on-one and on harmony, all those kinds of things.
Right.
Do it without data. Boy, I don't know how you would do it. I don't care how much AI you have. Like doing it without data is not something I would recommend.
Right. I did see someone come off mute. I'm trying to, please feel free to come back off mute. I saw you, but then you,
But then Matt kept talking.
yeah, well, I think I actually kept talking. Oh, Cray, uh, uh, did you have a question?
No, I was joining the meeting late, and so I'm still playing with my audio and video. Thank you. Very, very informative session.
Wonderful. We got a great comment in the chat. Don't hire for sameness.
Yeah.
Also being aware of the ageism factor. Yeah, absolutely.
So
That's
true.
so key. And I think, one of the things I will tell employers a lot, you guys have heard it from me before probably, is that over half the workforce is 40 plus in the United States. So that's really, it's a testament to the fact that the workforce is aging. And so we need to sort of think expansively about age. Age is just, we're all on the journey together. We're just at different points of it.
Jerry's got another great point there too, which is around sameness. So I don't think that the average manager gets almost any training when it comes to implicit bias or any of this, and not understanding why. You come out of a meeting with a candidate and saying, I didn't really like that candidate. Why? Well, they didn't really light up. They didn't shake my hand. They didn't look me in the eye. You're like, are these job requirements? Are they going to be working with the public? I'm like, no. You're like, okay, well, hold on a second. Like, just because they're not like you doesn't mean they're not a great fit for the job. That, by the way, you're hiring because you don't want to do that job. So it's like, as simple as it sounds to us as HR people, it is completely foreign to the average hiring manager or the interview team member. So again, I think this is where, a little education, again, can we please just elevate HR? Can we please do the people part right by using the tools and the techniques and follow their wise counsel? I've had so much hard coaching from HR over the years, made me a better leader as a result. Like, I just can't say it loudly enough to my executives and managers. We have to elevate the function, considering the seat of competitive differentiation is the people part. Like, can we elevate our people leaders, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jerry, for those additional comments. Yes, what perspective can people bring to the role? You can train for the harder skills, but really trying to find the right human skills is so important.
And innovation too. Innovation is not come from sameness and groupthink. It comes from diversity. And I feel like that's, diversity of thought, experience, to Jerry's point, all of it. And I think a lot of times when we say like, there's so much change happening, we have to try new things. Well, okay, let's make sure that we're hiring intentionally then, right? And let's make sure that we're not just getting more of the same, to Jerry's point. But I think, how do you make that a little less scary? I think it's to really just shine a light, hold up a mirror and say, like, this is sort of what it's going to take to remain competitive. This is how we're going to do it. Have a nice orderly plan. I think if I see HR professionals veer off course a little bit, it's because you know the answers to the test, but you don't take us on the journey as business people, right? So as an executive, you have to speak in my language. So you almost have to translate. Even though you know it's the best thing to do, you still have to sell. You still have to take the data, make the case, explain to them in terms they want, which is competitiveness, productivity, valuation, value creation, all these kind of terms that they use their terms. But then obviously, position your programs, your initiatives, because they're the right things. I hate to see HR people not get what they want when it comes to budget and influence. But as leaders, you have to go first. HR leaders are not accepted from that.
All right. Any other questions or comments as we wrap up? This has been such an incredible conversation, really rich. I love chatting with you, Matt. And we've talked about maybe creating potentially a resource around this together. Yeah, I think that would be
great. If
great.
people are interested, just let us know kind of what you would like to hear about. I'd be honored to contribute something to the vault, so to speak. But I think it's a very timely conversation, obviously. I mean, as HR professionals too, we have to recognize we're going through some stuff too. We're not impervious to all this change. So I think having a moment, taking some time over the break and, kind of checking in, resetting your values, your goals, these types of things are important, because we need our HR leaders to be at their best, because, we have so many needs when it comes to the people part. I said, people are hurting, strategies are being put at risk. Billions of dollars of valuation are being destroyed because we're just mismanaging the people part of all of this potential. So it will, I think we can change it. I think we can do things. So I'm optimistic about it, but I have to be honest and say that, in some cases we're making things harder than they need to be, and we're hurting people in the process.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up now, but I want to say again, thank you, Matt, so much for this great conversation. This is such an important topic. I think it is an ongoing topic, so we'd love to have you back. And I want to let everyone know we're looking forward to greeting you into the Alliance next year. We'll have our first, as I said, our first speaker call in February, so look for that and look for more announcements coming from me. But in the meantime, I wish you all a very happy holiday season and a restful holiday season, hopefully, and a chance to reconnect with family and decompress. So for all of that, happy holidays. And this concludes our call. Thank you so much to everyone for attending.